Good morning and welcome to today's edition of Newsline. We're coming to you live from our Newsfirst studios here in Colombo, and you're watching us on TV1. Today's topic centers around the human-elephant conflict, which is one of the main issues that is faced by rural Sri Lanka. Now, how does the human-elephant conflict impact the English-speaking audience in Sri Lanka? That may be on your mind. So I won't answer that question. I'll let our guest answer it. We'd like to welcome Dr. Prithviraj Fernando. He's the chairman of the Center for Conservation and Research. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
And thank you so much for joining us this morning. Doctor, what is the impact that the English-speaking community of Sri Lanka, who is our audience here right now on Newsline, what is the impact that this issue has on our audience?
Well, I guess human-elephant conflict, of course, is a concern for everybody in this country, English or Sinhala or Tamil speaking. But in addition, perhaps maybe the English-speaking audience is also more concerned about the elephant conservation.
Because they are not directly impacted, their houses are not destroyed, their crops are not destroyed by wild elephants. So it is not a threat to their life in the direct sense of the word. So what is the impact?
Yeah, so if you generalize, of course, I mean, there are English-speaking people in areas with elephants who may actually suffer from human-elephant conflict. But I agree with you. So a lot of the English-speaking audience is probably in areas where there are no elephants. So I would imagine that their concern might be more towards elephant conservation, because human-elephant conflict is one of the major issues with elephant conservation. Actually, most people, when I say that, most people would think yes, because a lot of elephants get killed. True. But there is something even more, something that is even deeper. Because of the human-elephant conflict, as a country, as conservation agencies like the Wildlife Department, we undertake a lot of management actions which are actually very detrimental to elephant conservation. For example, in Sri Lanka currently about 70% of the elephants are outside the protected areas of the Wildlife Department. And that is why we actually have such a high level of human-elephant conflict, because Sri Lanka has the highest human-elephant conflict in the world. But because of these elephants that are outside, we have this conflict. So the simple solution is to put all the elephants in the parks. And that is what has been tried for the past 60 years. But that has completely failed. So then we come to, so if we continue to do that, it is not that all these elephants can live inside the parks, they cannot. That is why it has failed. So either when you put the elephants inside the parks, they either starve to death or they have to break out. So if they break out again, you get back to square one, you have conflict again. If they starve inside the park, then they basically die, and that is very detrimental to elephant conservation. So I think from both sides, whether it's human-elephant conflict or elephant conservation, I think it's two sides of the same coin.
Right. Dr. Sri Lanka is presently in a phase of development across the board. How is this development affecting the wild elephants, especially given the fact that these boundaries of elephants are not being taken into consideration? Perhaps, for example, if we go and cut down a forest and build there, then where do the elephants go? I mean, these are common problems that are faced, but sustainability aspect is not being looked at. What's your view on that?
Yeah, clearly human-elephant conflict is caused by development in areas with elephants.
Right.
And with regard to human-elephant conflict, the biggest cause is really agricultural development, because crops are the growing of plants that have been changed by people over thousands of years to be much more nutritious, much more palatable, and much more concentrated than what is in the forest. So for an elephant, eating crops is 100 times better than eating what is in the forest. So actually elephants raid crops not because they don't have to eat in the forest, but because crops are much better. So as a result, unless we actually address that, then we can't address this problem. So basically, if we are to address human-elephant conflict, we need to focus on protecting the agricultural development in this country and doing the agricultural development in a way that will prevent the human-elephant conflict.
Dr. Fernando, you're involved in a lot of research with regard to elephants in Sri Lanka, but is there a census that has been carried out, or how do we know how many elephants are there, what are the areas they're in, and what are the issues that are faced by certain villagers? There is no one document that we can refer to in trying to find a feasible and a long-standing solution to this issue.
Yeah, currently the Wildlife Ministry and the department are revising the National Elephant Policy, which is trying to address many of these issues that you mentioned. So, yeah, I mean, it's a very complex issue. It's not a simple thing, and there is no silver bullet. There is no one thing you can do that will solve the problem tomorrow. I think the main problem with regard to human-elephant conflict and elephant conservation is that the way we have been trying to tackle it is completely wrong.
Right.
We have been trying to mitigate the human-elephant conflict by confronting elephants and acting aggressively towards them. That unfortunately only leads to more and more conflict. So that is why we are in this vicious circle today. We need to break out of it, and the way to do that is to use non-confrontational methods, and the best method so far that is available is electric fencing. To use electric fencing in a more sensible way to protect our property and our crops, rather than to limit elephants to wildlife department areas, which is what it has been used before for.
Dr. Fernando, one of the criticisms of electric fencing is that the location of the fence is it's in the wrong place. So who is to determine where exactly the fence goes?
Absolutely. I think that actually brings us to the crux of the problem. So electric fencing is perhaps the main thing that is usable to protect crops from elephants. But then where should that fence be? That is, like you said, that is the question. Currently, most of the electric fences in this country are between Wildlife Department forests and Forest Department forests. So they are between Wildlife Department and Forest Department. The fence is in the middle of the forest with elephants on both sides. Such fences cannot address human-elephant conflict. If we are to use elephant fences or electric fences to protect the crops and protect the villages, that will be much more successful. And then the question arises, who should be putting up these fences? Who should be maintaining and taking care of them? I think that can only be done by the people who are protected by these fences.
Dr. Fernando, now the main stakeholders, as in terms of the government agencies that are directly supposed to be involved in this process are the Wildlife Department and the Wildlife Conservation Ministry, right? So are there any more stakeholders that need to get involved, or what is your take on that?
Yeah, I think it's the nail on the head, because that is the real problem, because everybody in Sri Lanka expects the wildlife authorities to take care of this problem. They cannot. And the thing is, it's a topsy-turvy thing.
But isn't that their job?
Whose job? The Wildlife Conservation Department? What is their job? To conserve wildlife.
Okay.
But what are we doing when we talk about human-elephant conflict mitigation or prevention? We put up electric fences. We drive elephants. We translocate elephants. Are any of these for the protection of wildlife or elephants? No. These are all for the protection of the people. So human-elephant conflict and its mitigation is basically 99% for the people, from the point of view of the people. So I think the Wildlife Conservation Department, that is not their job. They should be looking after the elephants, and the people themselves and the agencies whose responsibility it is to look after the people's welfare should be involved in the human-elephant conflict mitigation, because it's a problem of the people.
So we've been doing it all wrong all these years? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and I think that is why it is not working. So clearly, whether we are doing it right or wrong, it is not working. So I think that is because we are doing it wrong.
We are in conversation with Dr. Prithviraj Fernando. He's the chairman for the Center of Conservation and Research. We're going for a short commercial break. We'll be right back.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukatali.
Hello there and welcome back. This is Newsline. If you're just joining us, we're here in our studio discussing the human-elephant conflict with an expert in the field, Dr. Prithviraj Fernando. Now, just hours ago, President Maithripala Sirisena, addressing the 71st session of the United Nations General Assembly, assured that there will never be another war in Sri Lanka again. We have a few excerpts from the President's speech. Let's very quickly take a look.
The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Maithripala Sirisena, President of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome to the United Nations His Excellency Maithripala Sirisena, President of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ නව පරිවර්තනීය යුගයක් ආරම්භ කරමින්
Commencing Sri Lanka's new transitional period, we have given priority to the much required economic and political reforms over the course of the last 20 months, while wiping out the social backdrop which was centered around fear and doubt prevalent before my government came into power. We are in the process of formulating the foundation required for the people of Sri Lanka to lead a happy and free life in democracy. My government's objective is to make Sri Lanka one of the happiest countries in the world to live in. Honorable President, in most nations around the world today, we see societies driven to the point of war, brutality, disharmony and hate. It is at these instances where the need for humanity has become a severe crisis. It is my firm belief that every nation must come together to create a community with fundamentals of humanity to resolve most conflicts prevalent in society. I also believe that the teachings and principles of Buddhism can be used to resolve the issues around the world today. Similarly, the teachings and practices of Christianity, Islam, Hinduism and other religions can be broadened, which requires the blessings of all nations.
කියන්නේ ආශිර්වාදයේ අවශ්‍ය යුගයක් ලෙසයි මා දකින්නේ.
Speaking further, President Maithripala Sirisena called on the international community and the United Nations to take stern measures to eradicate the drug menace prevalent around the world.
මේ අවශ්‍ය විනාශකම් රටවල් තුළ කිරීමේදී
While making these changes within their respective countries, I would like to draw the attention of the United Nations General Assembly of a severe crisis which is plaguing many other countries in the world as it is in Sri Lanka. This is the issue on drugs, which has caused a severe menace among the society and a tragedy among school children. While drawing the attention of the United Nations of this crisis, I see the need for a much broader and stronger program to be initiated internationally and at national level to wipe out this menace from humanity. Through the experiences we have gained as a country which faced a 30-year-long barbaric war with terrorism, priority has been given to ensure that another war will never break out at any given time in my country, my Sri Lanka, by creating freedom and democracy within the country through a strong foundation of national reconciliation to give birth to a dominant nation. For this process, I kindly request the blessing and assistance of all nations and organizations around the world.
ආශිර්වාදයේ සහ සහයෝගය මා ගෞරවයෙන් ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා.
Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukatali.
Welcome back to Newsline. How do we mitigate the human-elephant conflict? Dr. Prithviraj Fernando is in the studio, so let's ask the expert himself.
Yes, Sonali. So, like I said, electric fences are probably the most effective against elephants. Then the question is, who should be putting up these electric fences? Currently, it's mostly the wildlife department, but that is not a practical solution. Now, if we look at human-elephant conflict, the main problem is raiding of crops by elephants. But crops are things that are grown by people. So wherever there is a crop, there is a person who's cultivating it, who's tending it. So why should not that person take some step to protect his crops? Similarly, if an elephant breaks down a house, there is a person living there. If it's a village, if the village is being harmed, there are people living there. So the simplest solution is for the people who suffer from human-elephant conflict to take the appropriate actions, and yes, they cannot do it by themselves. Electric fences may be too expensive for them. So the government agencies should help them. But then who should help it? Now, look at it this way. There is a forest with elephants. We go and do agricultural development there, whether it's the irrigation department, the Mahawali authority or the agriculture department. We develop that area, we clear the area, and we start cultivating crops. People settle there and cultivate. We spend billions of dollars, not millions, billions, to do this development. Now these agencies and the people could allocate maybe 0.1% or 1% of that cost to prevent elephants coming into that area and raiding the developed area by putting up electric fence. And that can easily be done. They can maintain it because they are living there. So for a person, let's say, who's cultivating 2 acres of land, who's tilling it, who's plowing it, who's cultivating it, how can that person say, I can't maintain an electric fence on my boundary which is only about 10 or 20 meters? The only maintenance that is required for electric fence is to prevent something germinating under the fence, growing up and touching the wire and the current leaking. You have to nip it off. So if you are living there, if you are cultivating there, you can very easily do that. So I think that's the direction we need to go. The people themselves and the development agencies have to take the leading role to prevent human-elephant conflict.
But going forward, Doctor, I mean, rather than having electric fences to ward off elephants, why isn't there sufficient research being done to find out as to how we can look at it in a more holistic way without harming the elephant also? Why isn't sufficient research being done? I mean, is it an issue with the allocation of government funds, or are people just not incentivized enough?
Actually, Sonali, the funds is not the problem. I don't think we even have to spend any funds from Sri Lanka. For example, our agency, the Center for Conservation and Research, is an NGO that is mostly funded by us writing grants to conservation agencies outside.
Right.
So getting funding to do research is not a problem. Doing the research is not a problem. There are our organization, but there are other organizations and other researchers in this country who can do it and who are willing to do it. But unfortunately, there's very little help from the government sector to do this research. And even when you do the research, the findings are not used in the management. So I think this is the unfortunate situation that has led to this conflict going on and not being mitigated effectively.
Okay, so you're saying that the government sector is not proactively looking at this situation? Is that what you're saying conclusively?
Yes, I think the government sector is not looking at it proactively, nor are they even encouraging people to find solutions to it. Even when people do research amidst a lot of obstacles, even then that is disregarded. It's not taken into consideration.
All right. Dr. Fernando, I'd also like to talk about this concept of elephants being used in processions in Peraharas, which has been done over the past so many decades. There were several incidents reported in the recent past also where unruly elephants sort of creating a commotion had resulted in a death quite recently. Does this amount to animal cruelty? I mean, I know that there is a bit of a cultural divide on this issue, but if we were to look at this situation in a very factual manner, how do you view this? Elephants being used in processions, in Peraharas, in Sri Lanka, going forward? I mean, it has been done over the past so many decades, but going forward, should this be continued?
Well, personally, Sonali, I am not for elephants being used in Peraharas or pageants. But of course, I agree with you that it has been done for many decades or hundreds of years, and there are others who are equally adamant that we should continue those traditions. So I don't think it's realistic to think that that will be stopped in any time in the near future. So I think if we have elephants in captivity and if we use captive elephants in these processions, then we at least have a responsibility to do it in a much better way than it is done today. Currently, if you look at most of these Peraharas, the elephants that are going in the Perahara cannot even walk. Their all four legs are chained together so that they just have to shuffle forward. They are completely covered in cloths, with very thick cloth, which prevents conduction of heat. Elephants don't have sweat glands. They cool their body by evaporation, by just convection, and from their ears. And we cover all that, so these animals are probably under very high heat stress.
Right.
So, and then like the instances that you mentioned, I think a few days ago elephant ran amok, and the mahout was prodding it with a very sharp iron, the anchors. So I think as far as captive elephant management is concerned, in this country, it can be done. If it has to be done, it can be done in a much better way, and it should be done in a better way. So I think there have to be better training of and better thinking about what should be and what should not be done in the in captive management.
Okay, Doctor, who should be spearheading this initiative to mitigate the human-elephant conflict? Is there a person, or is there a body, or how should this be looked at?
Well, that's a difficult question. I don't know who should actually be doing it, but what I know is that the Wildlife Department alone cannot do it. So I think it really has to be the development sector, because it also is detrimental to the development, the economic development of the country.
By development sector, who are you referring to exactly?
Especially the agriculture sector. So
Right.
the irrigation department, the Mahavali Authority, the agriculture department, agricultural extension services department, all these people need to play a major role.
You're saying that since if elephants go run amok and destroy crops, then that comes within the purview of the agriculture agencies.
Well,
So
elephants don't run amok. They actually and destroy crops. They come and raid the crops.
right,
And so that is, the crops are necessary for people's well-being.
right.
And so the agencies who are responsible for the people's well-being and the agencies who create this problem by doing agriculture development in areas with elephants have to be the main stakeholders.
Right. Dr. Fernando, now with regard to captive elephants, there are a few writ petitions before the Court of Appeal. Parties, stakeholders are trying to reform the several pieces of legislation pertaining to captive elephants, especially the Cruelty to Animals Act. Do you think that we need to look at this in a legislative reform kind of way as well when it comes to wild elephants? What is the way forward?
I think the way forward is that there has to be a paradigm change. There has to be a change in how we approach human-elephant conflict per se. So legislative, yes, but I think it is more a case of the correct stakeholders taking responsibility. So the people like the administrative services have to play a big role in, say, protecting the villagers, in protecting the crops. Like I said, the people themselves have to be the primary stakeholders. So I think there has to be a much wider awareness as to who can effectively mitigate this problem, which is the people, I said, the people themselves and the relevant agencies. And they have to, if they want this problem solved or mitigated effectively, there is no other way. They have to take responsibility, and as long as that does not happen, I don't think this problem will go away or will diminish. It will only increase.
We've come to the end of the show, so my final question to you is, are you hopeful, are you optimistic that Sri Lanka can resolve the human-elephant conflict in the near future if we use the right methodologies and the right attitudes?
Yes, Sonali, I think if is the watchword there. So if we go the correct way, we can mitigate this problem, we can effectively solve this problem, and we can be an example to the whole world as to how we can live in harmony with a dangerous animal. That can be done, but there is a big if, as you say.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Prithviraj Fernando, Chairman for the Center of Conservation and Research. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. With that, we wrap up this edition of Newsline. We'll see you again tomorrow.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.